it's not just impeachment causing partisan divide on Capitol Hill. The findings of the Justice Department's watchdog report on the Trump campaign's ties to Russia also has much of Washington up in arms. Yesterday, the Inspector General found that the FBI was justified in opening the investigation and found no evidence of political bias. But the report also found Bureau agents made a series of errors. So Catherine Herridge has been combing through 434 pages of this report. She's joining us now from Washington. Catherine, break it down for us. What has been the initial response to this report from both sides?
Well, the report really matters now because of its political implications, and there's really enough here in it for both sides to claim they were right. Republicans say this report exposes wrongdoing by the FBI, and Democrats say it proves the investigation was legitimate.
It's everything that a lot of people thought it would be, except far worse.
President Trump was quick to seize on some of the report's findings.
They fabricated evidence and they lied to the courts. And they did all sorts of things to have it go their way.
The nearly 440-page Justice Department report found significant inaccuracies and omissions in all of the surveillance warrant applications for former Trump campaign aide Carter Page. In a statement, Page called the findings evidence of an egregious overreach by the intelligence community. But the report also found no documentary or testimonial evidence that political bias drove the FBI's decision-making. Inspector General Michael E. Horowitz said the FBI was on solid ground when it opened the July 2016 counterintelligence probe into alleged coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia.
There are actions described in this report that I consider unacceptable and unrepresentative.
FBI Director Christopher Wray acknowledged FBI personnel made significant mistakes, but agreed with the major findings, saying there was no, quote, deep state conspiracy.
That's not a term I would ever use to describe our workforce, and I think it's an affront to them.
But in a division within the department, his boss, Attorney General Barr, disputed the findings, saying the investigation into the Trump campaign was launched on the thinnest of suspicions.
So, Catherine, help us understand the mistakes. We heard in your report that Carter Page said that, this is an example of severe overreach by FBI officials. But break it down. How did they break the rules? What were the most serious errors?
Well, I think it's always worth going to the report itself. If you take a close look at page 413, it really lays out how there was an obligation on the government, specifically the FBI, to take all of the evidence, whether it supported or worked against the surveillance warrant application, to this national security court. But what the Inspector General found is that evidence that undercut the application was not provided to the judges. It reads in part, we found that members of the Crossfire Hurricane team, and that's the group that was leading the Russia probe, failed to meet basic obligations to ensure that the Carter Page FISA applications were, quote, scrupulously accurate. And it goes on to say that the evidence supporting probable cause was probably stronger than the actual case. So in other words, over time, they were gathering more evidence about Carter Page, but rather than strengthening the rationale to do surveillance on this former Trump campaign aide, it had the effect of weakening the rationale, but that was not shared with the National Security Court, Anne-Marie.
So the thing about this report is it appears there's a little bit of something in there for everyone. And for the Democrats, at least it came out suggesting that there was no political bias that influenced any of the decision making. What does this conclusion mean for the legitimacy of the Russia probe on whole?
Well, looking ahead, what we see now is that there's significant daylight between the Inspector General, Michael E. Horowitz, who found that the 2016 Russia investigation was really on solid ground when it was opened by the FBI, and Attorney General William Barr, who put out a statement saying he believed the investigation was opened on the thinnest of suspicions. And then on top of that, we had this very rare statement from the U.S. Attorney in Connecticut, John Durham, and he matters because he's running a Russia investigation, but it has a broader scope looking into the origins of the FBI probe. And he said he also disagreed with Horowitz. And then you add on top of that the FBI Director Christopher Wray, who sided with the Inspector General. And it's highly unusual to see so much daylight between such senior officials. and to see it play out so publicly, Anne-Marie.
Yeah. So meantime, the Inspector General is going to be testifying tomorrow. So despite the 400 odd pages in this report, there are always more questions to be asked. So what do you think lawmakers are hoping to hear?
Well, lawmakers want to hear what kind of corrective measures will be taken by the FBI and whether ultimately anyone will be responsible. The bottom line when you look at this report is that multiple applications were made to do surveillance on an American inside the United States, and each one of these applications had either inaccuracies or omissions. But still, the National Security Court was never made aware of that fact pattern, so they kept signing off on these surveillance warrants. And critics say the court amounted to a rubber stamp in this case. And that's a problem because there's really no higher threshold in terms of probable cause than looking at an American inside this country and using the most intrusive methods possible. So collecting emails, collecting text messages, being able to wiretap someone. These are authorities that were designed after 9/11 to bust spy rings and domestic terrorism plots. And we had those same authorities and investigative tools turned on someone who was connected to a political campaign, Anne-Marie.
Yes. Catherine, thank you so much, and also
You're
welcome.
welcome. Oh, of course. It's great to be here.